Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. I am coming to you from Utah, and my guest today is one of my favorite people. I follow him on every platform I possibly can. His name is Michael Yon, and if you've never heard of this gentleman, first of all, he's an absolute stud because he's an Army veteran, former Special Forces guy, and he then became a war correspondent that world renowned. And so, Michael, welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Prost. Coffee this morning.
Right on. I know you're coming at us from Bangkok, so there might be a tiny bit of a delay, but it's amazing that we can actually talk all the way across the world here.
It is. I was just recently over in Okinawa and checking out the Japanese situation, and before that, Taiwan, checking that out. Of course, I'm in Thailand now, not Taiwan. And then before that, Canada, actually watching the invasion up there. And before that, Bahamas, watching that as an invasion route. And before that, down in Darien Gap, where you were at before. And the Darien Gap is just getting worse. I mean, you were out extensively in Darien Gap, and now it's more intense than it was even when you were there. And when you were there, it was obviously already full-blown invasion to the Darien Gap.
Yeah. So for those of you that may not know, I think it was the end of May 2021. So almost 3.5 years ago.
Was it that long?
Yeah. Can you believe it? Yeah, that's crazy.
We were way ahead of the curveball back then. Back then people were like, what's Darien Gap? Why is it important?
Yeah.
And now it's really obvious, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's critical right now. And it's, back then I remember the village that we went to, after that 3-hour boat ride, it was pretty amazing because we were talking about the immigration status, like 200 to 300 immigrants a day were coming through there. And I know it's got to be 10x that now.
Oh Lord. Yeah. It was only 200 or 300 a day when you were there. That's right.
Yeah.
Because that's when I was warning. I was like, no, that's going to be 10 times that or more. And now it is. It literally is. Now it fluctuates, of course, with the rains, but that's normal. See, but on the average, it's literally 10 times that now. And not only that, not only is it 10 times through that area, but many are flowing around it now. So in other words, they're still hitting our borders, but they're just not going through the Darien. Like, for instance, many of the Cubans now and the Haitians, they will go. Most of the Cubans and Haitians will skip Darien and they go land in Nicaragua, right? So they bypass that, or others flying straight from Colombia straight to the United States. By the U.S. government's doing it. I mean, people keep saying we should, do sanctions against Panama or Mexico or what. It's the most uninformed thing ever to be saying that. It's like silly. It's like thinking that Spanish is the national language of China. You know what I mean? It's just like that far out there. The United States government is doing it. Our government is the one doing it. And the United Nations is the main mechanism of it. But our government is nakedly invading our own country. Our own government is the one doing massive child trafficking. Just this morning, I got some messages. Somebody's asking for help tracking some missing child on the border. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how serious this is. This isn't about one missing child. We're talking hundreds of thousands, right? Nobody even knows how many. We've got an industrial scale invasion going on, and our government's doing it.
Yeah. The last count I heard was 300,000 lost kids. They have no idea where a lot of these kids are. And, I've done enough episodes now and interviewed enough people that, the sex trafficking and the child trafficking is just horrendous. And so I would think that the majority of those 300,000 kids are either being recycled to create, the families so they can come across the border, but I'll bet most of them are off in the sex trade somewhere, which is just makes me sick to my stomach.
Yeah, many are flown around America night and day, like from Brownsville, Texas, and all over Texas, different places. And they're flown to Florida, they're flown to Alaska, they're flown. I mean, we've covered this extensively, so this isn't anything new, but it's horrific, and it's just ongoing, and nothing is done about it. Nobody knows where these children are going. And if you broaden this out to places like Ireland, Ireland's set to be genocided. I mean, straight up, there's not one half of percent hyperbole there. Ireland is set to be genocided at the current rate, and I think that it probably will be, actually. And again, I've gone over there.
In what direction, Michael? When you say genocided, you're saying the Irish people or the other way around?
Irish people. Oh yeah, clearly. I just finished last night reading a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's interesting. It's a very, very interesting book. I highly recommend it. And if you actually want to understand a lot of what's going on in places like Ireland and the United States, read The Creature from Jekyll Island. I mean, it's mostly about the Fed and the huge criminality that goes on there. But in reality, it covers all the invasions. It covers the pandemics. It covers the idea of using space aliens to frighten people into a world government. Basically, it's about world government, right? It's about totalitarianism and enslaving, especially the United States. Once you've enslaved the United States, then the rest are, easy. That it's easy to bring the rest along by the nose. And the United States is a long way down that path already. For instance, we have no borders. Meanwhile, we've got Americans talking about, let's go save Israel. Let's go save Ukraine. We have no border. We don't have a border crisis because we have no border, and it's not a crisis. It's a war, right? This is a straight up war. This is an existential war. And again, there's people that'll say that this is conspiracy theory or whatever. I'm done with them. I have no time for them. They're not serious people. This is a state of war. My mind changes when I go to wars. You'll see a different part of me gets activated where I have zero time for clowns. Right here in Bangkok, 2 years ago there were no marijuana stores. Now there's like within 15 minutes walk of me, there's probably 20, 25 dope stores. Like there's one like a couple 100 meters from me, 100 meters away. You can walk in and just buy all the dope you want. You know what I mean? I mean, now, again, there's people that go, oh, it's about my freedom, man. It's about medicinal marijuana. Again, I have no time for clowns. This is not what this is about. They don't understand what's going on. Our societies are being dumbed down, drugged up, brainwashed, so that we can just be easy in the saddle, as one attorney once said years ago, Jerry Spence, easy in the saddle, train the horse, and the next thing you know, you're just pulling the plow, and that's what's happening right now. So I see countries around the world, like when you were in Panama, there was the IOM there that's running. They're the ones that are running the main part of the invasion, the International Organization for Migration. There's another regional headquarters, by the way, in Manila in the Philippines. So what you're seeing there in Panama, in the Ciudad de Ciber, the city of knowledge in Panama City, former Fort Clayton, that's the regional headquarters for the invasions of all of Central America and Mexico as well. Mexicans think that they're just a pass-through country. I keep telling Mexicans and my Mexican friends, you will be killed. You will die. This is not about let's go get America. Let's go get Canada. They're going to get you too. For sure, all those little gangsters that you got there, they are nothing when they hit you with biological warfare. Now, I know the big cartels are very powerful against normal people and that sort of thing. But when you go up against Chinese Communist Party and other players like this that you can't really reach, but they can reach you, they're going to kill you. They're going to kill you in mass numbers, poison your water, poison your air, poison your food, put you into famine. That's what's happening. When I went up to Canada recently, went to Toronto, went to Vancouver, went to Yellowknife, which is up by the Arctic Circle. I hadn't been to Yellowknife since since I was in the Army, actually, many years ago. And but Yellowknife is, it's like, bear country. You know what I'm saying? I mean, literally, there's like people drying bears on the corners of their houses and that sort of thing, bear skins. But but the bottom line is, up in Yellowknife, 250 miles from the Arctic Circle, all the taxi drivers I had for more than about 10 days were all from like Nigeria, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan. This is the Arctic, almost at the Arctic Circle, 250 miles away, right? And so this is why. Why are there so many migrants, quote unquote, there? And then you go down south, like you go to Vancouver, you go to Toronto, massive numbers of South Indians, massive numbers of Chinese just taking over. Canadians have already lost. That's done. Canada's done. It's cooked, just like Ireland, right? But why? Because this is a divide and conquer strategy. You're bringing in all these different people that will fight and each other. And so, this is a perfect setup for taking the resources, enslaving people. It's happening right now. There's many different oligarchical systems that are fighting, by the way. It's not like there's just one group. It's not like it's just the World Economic Forum and that sort of thing. There's also the Chinese Communist Party. There's the South Indians. There's all kinds of different oligarchical structures that are simultaneously destroying us because the West has become so weak with their little dope all over the place. I go back to the United States and I smell dope all over the place. Every time I bring it up, people get upset. Oh, it's about my freedom, man. What about alcohol? Okay, alcohol too, right? Same thing. What I'm saying is I spend most of my time overseas in other countries. And when I go back to the United States, I go all over the United States, coast to coast, Key West to Washington State to Maine. I'm all over the place, right? I'm out with farmers. Right. I'm out with lawmakers, law enforcement. I've been across the entire southern border from the Gulf to San Diego. I've seen it. I've seen the United States. More than 99% of Americans who spend all their time there, I've seen more of it than 99%. I know what's going on. My country's doped up. United States is doped up. I come back, I can see it. It's pharmaceuticals that they're taking prescription drugs that are altering their attitudes, their moods, their susceptibility to brainwashing. Dope that they sell in stores all over the place. Now I smell it everywhere I go. Elevators, hotels, and now it's here in Bangkok. And it only started 2 years ago. There's dope stores all over the place here now. This is part of the actual war, is to soma, dope you up, and call, the old term soma. That's what it is, right? Sleep to dope you up, isolate you down. And because the average person actually wants to be a slave, believe it or not. And they will provide that here. Take your soma, be my slave. And so that's why this invasion's going on, because Americans aren't standing up to it. Irish are not standing up. There are a few all across Europe not standing up. So now the genocides have already begun. They've already begun. You see people getting stabbed constantly, raped constantly. This is not going to be normal crime. These are going to be straight up mass murder and genocide.
Yeah. Well, I was actually watching the interview you did with Jordan Peterson, and one of the interesting things that you said was, let me quote it here. It said, professionals talk about conditions and amateurs talk about sparks.
Yeah.
And one of the sparks that I saw was it's causing a lot of those riots over in the UK. And it just crushes me that, all these beautiful countries that they've allowed such mass migration that there's no chance that these people will be assimilating into the culture. And so they're basically just replacing the culture. But that spark that you were talking about, based on the conditions of what is happening, was that migrant walked in and stabbed a whole bunch of little kids and killed like 3 of them. And that just kind of sparked everything. And now there's all these.
The sparks are irrelevant. The sparks are completely irrelevant. It's
the
about
sparks
conditions.
are easy.
Yeah.
Those are easy.
The sparks are always there. They're always there. It's about conditions, right? It's about the dry forest. There's always sparks. There's lightning. There's kids with bottle rockets. There's somebody flicking a cigarette out. There's always sparks. But, you were in the Darien Gap. You could have a 747 crash filled with fuel in the Darien Gap, and it will not burn down the Darien Gap. It's a rainforest. It'll be a smoking crater for a while, and then the flames will go out. But, one little spark in California where they don't clear the underbrush for a generation, and, and it's, there's been drought and that sort of thing, and towns burn down. So it's not about the sparks. It's about the conditions, and the conditions have been intentionally set. Many of the people setting these conditions, like these, Texas billionaires and whatnot, who are helping to set these conditions, they are actually committing suicide for the things that they want to have in the future. They're selling out short term. You might think of a lot of these, super wealthy people as being so much smarter, but, I'm around some of them, for extended periods sometimes. I'm like, a lot of these guys aren't any smarter than the average person. A lot of them kind of came into that wealth, right? They're not the ones who actually made it, right? And they're fools. They're actually literally helping set conditions for their own destruction, right?
Yeah.
Then there's others who are actually quite sophisticated. If you read the book, again, The Creature from Jekyll Island, I just finished reading it last night. Actually, and just before that, I read that Ron Paul book on, getting rid of the Fed, right? But if you read the Creature from Jekyll Island, you'll see how the very sophisticated people operate. Because there is another class of people that are incredibly wealthy, and they are actually highly sophisticated. And there's this idea, I was talking with Masako Ganaha about this just yesterday. This idea, people say, I remember when the media was honest. I remember when journalists were honest. No, you don't. No, you don't. You just don't. If you're alive right now and you're watching this, I don't care if you're 90 years old watching this, you don't remember when media was honest. You remember when you thought they were honest, but I can assure you they were being bought in bulk in the 1800s. They were being bought in bulk in more than 100 years ago, 130 years ago. They were buying journalists. They were buying newspapers. The globalists, they were buying editors by the dozen, right? You don't remember it. It never happened. What you remember is when you didn't realize it. And now you realize it's completely corrupted. You realize that now, but you didn't realize it then because they were better at it. And also, we didn't have these channels like you and I have now to talk about it. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have our own private channels, but now we do. And they want to look what just happened to the Telegram guy. He just got arrested in France. They want to shut down any of our freedom to communicate. And because, the cat's getting out of the bag.
Yeah. Well, you have former military officers threatening Elon Musk that he's going to get arrested next.
Who's threatened Elon Musk now?
Oh, it was that Vindman guy, the Colonel Vindman.
That guy's total trash. He's
I know he's a
Ukrainian,
garbage, but
operator.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm just saying that's coming from some guy like that, threatening Elon Musk. I was just like, you know what? It's so blatant nowadays, and it's so out in the open that they don't even pretend to, or even try to hide it anymore.
They don't even hide it. And a lot, keep in mind, and this is true. I noticed this when I was in India. When I was in India years ago, you can never go wrong with studying mathematics or studying cults. You know what I mean? Every minute you study mathematics or cults is a minute invested, right? And so I was in India and I was studying cults, right? And I actually first got on that idea when I was in the Army, when I was in Special Forces, and some of the older soldiers who would be like 40, they would say, you need to study world religions and cults. I'm like, cults, I'm a Green Beret. Why would I be studying cults? But then over time, it becomes actually quite apparent. You realize the only cult people never see is the cult that they're in. And we are surrounded by cults, and people that are very sophisticated can make cults almost instantly, right? They can create cults out of thin air, seemingly. There's an art and a science to it, but
go into that a little bit, Michael, about, I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit here. We've covered, an amazing amount of ground here, but I got to make sure that we keep the listener and the watcher, the viewer, included in our conversation here, because we have a lot of context that they may not. And
right.
So, a lot of this, like our relationship, for example, started, again, almost 3.5 years ago when we took those two congressmen down to the Darien Gap. And the whole reason that we did was because as soon as President Biden took office, he began opening up the southern border,
Yep.
and he was also encouraging all of this immigration. Well, initially, I think we were all kind of looking at it, including the congressman but pretty much anybody on the conservative side. I think we were looking at what Biden was doing as kind of almost like an isolated area. We're kind of pigeonholing, what he was doing as part of, for example, the consensus. They wanted to bring in voters. They wanted to bring in
Not me.
people that were
Not me.
going to affect
Straight
that.
up.
No, I
Not me.
understand.
If you look
I
at my old
understand.
interviews, I'm like, this is not about voters. People kept saying that. I'm like, no, this is about replacement. That's like,
Right.
Voters is only one little tiny sliver of this. This is about something much bigger than voters.
Right. Well, and that's why I wanted to include that, is because yes, when we were going down there, that was our mindset. But between you and Chuck and everybody else that helped us get down there and actually see what was going on, well, first of all, I mean, bringing people through or encouraging people to come through the Darien Gap and make that trek, to me is just immoral, just in itself, because of the human tragedy and the hardship. And then you start talking about kids, and then it just magnifies that by 100x. Well, but that's just one small part of it. And one of the primary reasons that I really wanted to talk to you, I mean, this is a crime show. I mean, we talk about, what constitutes and what kind of the conditions for crime are. But I think this is one of the largest crimes in the history of man, because literally, like what you said, what is happening is we are being replaced. And it's I think the entire Western culture, whether you're in Europe or Australia or here in the Northern Hemisphere, this entire culture is being replaced. And the only way that can happen is one, it has to be replaced physically with people, but it also has to be replaced with, how we live and what we believe in, and everything that has kind of started the country. Well, what are the conditions? And here's where I want you to go with this. What are the conditions that have to occur in order for a massive country like ours to be, replaced? Because you can't just physically do it just with people. I mean, over the past 3-4 years, we've let in, let's say, the official number is around 10 million, but it's probably double that at least. Well, that's great, but 20 million can't replace 337 million instantly. The conditions for being replaced have to start happening. Not only just the physical immigrants, but other conditions. And so what are those?
Yeah, right. It may sound like I'm talking about disparate things, drugs and cults. I'm not. I'm going somewhere with this. You have to let me develop it, right?
Right.
Cults, right? It's brainwashing, right? You have to understand the average American, not just Americans, but Europeans as well. I lived in Europe for more than 6 years, by the way. I'm quite familiar with the terrain. I spreche Deutsch. I speak German. I've been all over Europe, right? And I go back on a regular basis, right? So I've been all over the place there. I've seen it, right? They're just as easy. They might think that they're high above all this, but they're not. Brainwashing, right? Why do we have no border? We have no border because people are like, oh, I don't want to be called a racist. This is conditioning, brainwashing, cult making, that sort of thing. People that in the various cults, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, all these idiotic cults, but they are little robots, meat robots. You see, Trudeau up in Canada, or the people in the many different, there's so many cults out there. It's unbelievable. Right. And they are made quite easily. Now, one of the ways that you want to get people into the mood to be culted up is drugs. That's why I keep talking about drugs. And the dopers will be like, it's about medicinal freedom. No, it's not. It's about making you stupid to talk about medicinal and making and talking about your freedom, laying on your couch while we have no border. That's why when I was on with Alex Jones and he's asking me if I wanted to go on with Joe Rogan. They're good friends. And I said it right on live. No, I don't want to go on Joe Rogan. I'm not going on Mr. Dope Joke. I'm probably the only person in the world who's openly turned down the opportunity to go on Joe Rogan. I'm not and I know it makes people upset, especially the dopers who think that they're so smart, like, hey, you missed going on that big audience. It's like, yeah, believe it or not, I can do that math, but the dopers don't actually believe that you can do that math. But the bottom line is, why did I not go on? Why did I even turn down any opportunity? I'm not bringing anything that will help Americans, justify getting drunk and high with Joe Rogan live on his show, literally getting drunk and high while we have no border. And what does he do? Whoosh, whoa. And they'll say, well, he's got the best, whoosh. He always does whoosh, like he's high on drugs or mushrooms or something. He is part of the brainwashing operation. He's a nothing. He's a zero, right? He's big to little people, but on the big scale of the kind of people, the globalists who are doing this, he's a cigarette butt. Same with Trudeau. Trudeau is nothing but a condom for globalists. He's not the prime minister. He's a meat puppet. Harris, meat puppet. Trump is a meat puppet. Trump is a nothing compared to the people we're dealing with. Now, the people that are in his group, I know, I'll never read you again, Michael. Yeah, I don't trust you. You've jumped the shark. Whatever, man. I'm telling you what's the truth. Look at my track record on the wars. Look at my predictions on the wars. Look at my predictions on Nord Stream. When you and I went to the Darien Gap, Jared, Nord Stream had not been destroyed yet, right? But I took Masako Ganaha to Ludwigshafen, Germany twice to BASF plant. This is all part of what I'm talking about. This is all part of the larger picture. These aren't random roads I'm going down. These all come together. We know that the globalists, what they're doing is deindustrializing Europe. They're deindustrializing the United States. They're making slaves out of people, social security number, birth certificates. This is all about slavery, right? This is all about economic slavery, the Fed, economic slavery, right? This is all part of the larger picture. They're going to put us into food crisis. I've been warning about this since January and February of 2020. We're going to end up in global famines. So anyway, Masako and I went to Germany, Ludwigshafen, Germany. In 1914, that's when they started the Haber-Bosch process in Ludwigshafen, Germany, creating nitrogenous fertilizers and explosives from natural gas. You take the hydrogen off the natural gas, combine it with the nitrogen that we're breathing, and make ammonia. Make nitrogenous fertilizers like ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, which they need desperately here in Thailand because this is a huge rice producer, and rice is basically a vacuum for nitrogen out of the soil. And they only create about 8% of their nitrogenous fertilizers. The rest of it's imported, right? Not to go into Thailand, but there's a reason why I'm here, and it ain't vacation, right? So the bottom line is Ludwigshafen. We went there in August 1st, 2022, and went there on September 12th, 2022, right? Warning that I thought Nord Stream was going to be interrupted. Warning in advance that I thought Nord Stream may be destroyed or turned off. Last time I was at Ludwigshafen at BASF, huge producer of nitrogenous fertilizers. The German economy is dependent on BASF. It's incredibly important. I was there on September 12th with Masako. About 12 days later, 14 days later, Nord Stream was destroyed. Was September 26th, right? 2022. Boom. How did I know that? Because I know what they're doing. I watch what they're doing. I study them. I know what their intent is. They say it. They signal it. Then in April of 2023, I was up at Groningen in northern Netherlands. That is the largest gas field in Europe. And I was saying, I think they're going to close Groningen gas field. And people are like, they're never going to close Groningen. And I was like, remember when I said, I think they're going to destroy or interrupt Nord Stream? And they did, right? You know what I'm saying? To target BASF and the nitrogenous fertilizer supply chain and other supply chains. And they did. Well, now they've done it to Groningen. Groningen is closed now, right? So these things, I have a long list of things that I've been successfully and publicly predicting, publicly, in writing, in interviews like this, like the screwworms in Panama that I told you about when you were there. The screwworms, remember that facility that where we irradiate flies to stop these flesh-eating worms from getting to the United States. The Darien Gap is the front line in this battle. So way back when you were in Darien, I was warning about screwworms, and now they're back. And people are like, screwworms? Where do you come up with this stuff? I'm just like, put it on your calendar. Multi-drug resistance, tuberculosis, typhus, screwworms. And now look, it's all here, right? It was highly predictable if you study like Rain Man 7 days a week, which I do. And you will accept the answers that you actually get. You don't try to rationalize them away. What's happening now as we eventually go into these global famines, they are coming, that will create HOP, human osmotic pressure, that will clear people, that will push and pull people through the Darien Gap. That's why I keep going to the Darien Gap. That's where I found that road down there last year, right, that they're building, because I kept checking. I know they're going to connect Colombia at some point. Now they're doing it, right? That will be an invasion road from Colombia into Panama straight. You can dump out all of South America down that road. I think the time will come when you're going to see Colombia, especially, they're keeping quiet right now. I haven't seen anybody predict this in writing or in any interviews. This is just coming from me. Take it for what it's worth. I would put your money on it. I'm getting good at this over the years. I think Colombia, after that road is built, will eventually start to make claims on Panama. Because for us to open the Panama Canal, which we opened in 1914, the same year that Ludwigshafen, BASF at Ludwigshafen started with nitrogenous fertilizers, that happened to be the same year Panama Canal was open. But in order for us to finish the Panama Canal, we sponsored a breakaway country called Panama from Colombia. That used to be Colombia, right? So we helped Panama break off so that we could actually build the canal, right? Now, when the Colombian tried to send their Navy up, we sent the U.S. Navy and blocked them. So Colombia has been sore ever since. They don't talk much about it, but China is working closely down with Colombia and closely with Ecuador. They just muscled them hard about 3.5 months ago, but China did anyway. But the bottom line is I think Colombia is going to make a claim on Panama after they've got that road open, and then they're going to probably try to salami slice Panama down in the Darien where you were at, and eventually China will use, this is what I think is going to unfold. China will eventually, they'll use Colombia as their mechanism for taking the Panama Canal, and then China will have it. And the Panama Canal is this artery for us, right? Just like Nord Stream is this artery for BASF. And when you look at Groningen gas field in Europe, that's big, right? And you see, by the way, where Groningen is, you look where Netherlands is, that's where the globalists are developing tri-state city, which is all part of this larger thing that I'm talking about. The invasion through the Darien Gap, the invasion coming from the Canadian border, the invasion coming through Bahamas, all these, most Americans don't even realize there's a big Chinese port right off the Florida coast. We were just there this year. And this, we are being surrounded. Chinese are, they built a huge library in San Salvador. Masako and I went down there and went into it. They got a Chinese communist flag flying downtown in San Salvador, El Salvador. They are taking the squares on the chessboard all around us, right? So what I'm getting to is this is not random stuff. This is not about voters. They don't care about voters. It's not about voters. The Trump voters, the super Trump supporters who are sending their last pennies and savings, they seem to have forgotten that the last election was stolen. It was obviously stolen. And yet, what are we going to do? Vote harder this time? You think they need those voters? I went to the midterms over in Maricopa County, Arizona, right? I was in the United States for the presidential elections, which were clearly stolen. Then I went to Maricopa County for the midterms, clearly stolen, right in front of me. I called Ann in Florida. I said, Ann, you're not going to believe it. They're still in the elections right in front of me. I went to 2 of the voting places in Maricopa, and both of the places, the machines didn't work, and they were sending people to other places where the machines would work, and they weren't working either, right? Anyway, stole those elections too. Why would they need millions of voters to steal the vote when they're already stealing the vote, right? It's not about that. This is, the invaders that are going into Ireland, that are going into Sweden, that are going into London, they're not going in to steal the vote. It's just Americans, for some reason, have got it in their mind it's about stealing the vote. And if we just, it's a diversion. If we somehow keep them from stealing the vote, we'll get our guy in, right? No, you won't. If they stole it last time, why would they not steal it again, right? That's what it's about. I mean, This is why when I come back to the United States and I travel all over the place, right? And I see this dopers everywhere talking about my freedom, right? You're not being a man, right? It's time to do man stuff. Everybody wants to be a hero until it's time to do hero stuff. It's time to be like our ancestors, or you will lose the country, period. It will be gone, period. There won't be any, hey, we got our Second Amendment. Yeah, there's no border. Millions of people are coming across per year. I've been across the entire border. You know who's helping them get across the border? Border Patrol. Border Patrol. Border Patrol. Border Patrol is loading them up on the buses. They're like little gears and watches. They don't even know what time it is, right? There's a lot of patriots on Border Patrol, but the Border Patrol is loading up the buses. The Border Patrol is giving them the paperwork. The Border Patrol is the one telling the people with cameras to get back, right? The Border Patrol and the U.S. Customs and Border, they're flying into Atlanta every day. They're flying into Miami. They're flying into Dayton. They're flying all over the place. They're flying in from Colombia. They're flying in from Guatemala. The United States government is doing this. The Department of Homeland Security, the camp that you went to, San Vicente camp down in Darien, I was physically present when Mayorkas came. He came on April 18th, I think, of 2022, right? It was sometime. I must have left BASF and went straight back to Panama or something. I mean, it was like it was right around that time. Was it April? It was sometime around that time, right? He was actually, I think, April 18th, 2022. I was physically present when he came down there and increased the flow through the Darien Gap, brought millions of dollars and increased the size of the camps that you were at. You wouldn't recognize them if you go back, Jared. I'll take you back down there. Those camps are so much bigger, so many more buses now. And again, they're flowing around.
That camp that was like right next to the hotel we stayed at?
Yep. That's San Vicente camp. That's the one I call China camp. There's huge amounts of Iranians coming through there. Highest, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Their office is right next to the camp, right next to the front gate. I almost rented that house that they got as their office, but they got it before me. But Highest, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, has, they're one of the main invasion forces right there. They're constantly in that camp. I mean, seriously, you can walk into the camp from their office in like 1 minute, literally 1 minute. It's like 40 yards away. I mean, it's unbelievable. And, interestingly, I took down I was down there with Ann Vandersteel, Masako Ganaha, Laura Loomer, Brett Weinstein, Dr. Chris Martinson, and some others. And after one of the trips, there was a fire in that camp that you were at, San Vicente camp, the one I call China camp. There was a fire, burned all the records. Weirdly, they say it burned all the records. I don't know. The records could have been stolen. I know that camp very well. I've been in that camp dozens and dozens of times. I know every square inch of it. They could have stolen those records. I don't know. But just so happened there was a riot shortly after we were there because we were saying, look, there's huge amounts of Iranians coming through. There's huge amounts of Palestinians coming through. There's Egyptians. There's from 150 countries, Afghans, massive numbers of Afghans and Chinese coming through every single day, 24. It's more like a bus stop than a camp now, because if you come in at the right time of day, if you come in the morning, for instance, you'll be out that afternoon. You'll come in, do processing, take a shower, and you're on a bus. You're on the way to the United States at that point. So it's only a camp if you happen to have to stay overnight, and in which case it's just a free hotel.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, it's another one of the things that you were talking specifically about. Well, and you kind of mentioned it, that HOP, the human osmotic pressure, but you also talked about the trifecta of the pandemic, famine, and war. And so, I think it'd be really interesting for people to hear your explanation of what that is, because I remember when we were, again, on some of the bus rides and even the canoe ride, we were, right next to each other. And so you were talking about that trifecta and how that is throughout history of mankind. That has always been the condition of whenever a country has fallen, they've fallen based on one of those three things or a combination of those three things. So
go ahead.
Kind of explain that.
Oh, pandemic, famine, and war, they go together. I mean, they are. I mentioned this to you before. I used to say that a lot. I call it PANFO war, so people can remember pandemic, famine, war, PANFO war, pandemic, famine, war. I was doing an interview maybe 4 years ago, and a lady said, "You talk about PANFO as if you made it up." She came in, she was a live caller, and I was like, "Yeah, I did make it up." And she said, "No, it's in the Bible." And I was like, "Oh man, I plagiarized the Bible apparently." If you're gonna go big. So,
Yeah, no kidding.
But I was like, actually, it is in the Bible. That's probably where I got it from. And I said, and so, but pandemic, famine, and war, the four horsemen, right? There's the three: pandemic, famine, and war, pestilence, famine, and war, and and then despotism or death, right? And they do go together, and there's specific reasons for it. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but I won't. But in summary, if you get a big famine, you will get war and pandemic. If you get a big pandemic, I mean a real pandemic, you will get famine and war. If you get one, you'll get the other two. And then the fourth, death, or people argue about what the fourth one is. But I mean, whether it's death or despotism, authoritarianism, but those three, they go together like smoke and fire and heat, I mean, and there's reasons for it. For instance, let's say the yellow fever outbreak in Philadelphia in 1793. A lot of the farmers, they'll just stop farming because they didn't know what caused yellow fever back then. We didn't know that until when? Maybe 1903, 1905, sometime around then. I'm sorry, my memory's lost on yellow fever. Is quite interesting. But anyway, during those times, they didn't know what caused it. They just knew a lot of people were dying from it. There's mass graves around the United States for yellow fever in Florida, Texas, right? There was huge outbreaks in Memphis. That's why that's one of the reasons we ended up with the Louisiana Purchase. Thank you, yellow fever. It ran off the French, right? Just like it ran them out of Haiti, right? And plus they had their war going on back in France and they needed the money, but not to go into that. But the bottom line is the farmers started leaving. So then they stopped farming. Actually, during most pandemics that I've studied, in almost all cases, the government, actually in all cases except for the one that we just had that I can remember, the government's always trying to make it, or the king or whatever, is trying to make it seem not as bad as it really is. Only in this one that we just went through and whatever comes next, monkeypox or whatever, is the government actually trying to play it up like it's a lot worse. But usually they're trying to play it down, like the cholera outbreak in London in 1854, that sort of thing. They're usually trying to play it down because the cities will clear out, the economies will collapse, the kingdom will collapse, right? And the farmers leave their farms, then you don't actually have people farming. That's one of the reasons you can end up going into famine, right? They play into each other. Anyway, the pandemic, famine, war, they have a certain synergy that goes together. And that's why they all three create that HOP, that human osmotic pressure, right? So if you create an actual famine, which the globalists have talked about, and they've done it. I mean, there's been many famines that have been caused by various sorts of globalists, like the Victorian famines, or how about the 1845 to 1854 famines in Ireland, right? That was the English were hugely behind that. It wasn't just the fungus on the Irish lumper potatoes. Actually, people argue when it actually ended. So, I mean, roughly started 1845-ish. People argue about that, but roughly ended 1854. I get it. For the famine experts, they'll start to quibble. But the bottom line is, those are the bookend years, right? And, you saw the Irish Protestants fighting the Catholics, and the Protestants were withholding food from the Catholics, and they still talk about it, man. You should go over to Ireland and go to their museums. They're still sore about all that, right? So I mean, and that was why we ended up with a lot of HOP, human osmotic pressure. There were many famines in Ireland, but that one in particular, the big one, or there was another one in the 1820s. I mean, there's been a lot, but bottom line is that's why you ended up with so many Irish around the world, was that human osmotic pressure. And the Irish population has never recovered. I think now there's how many Irish were there at the beginning of the 1845 famine? Was it 5 million? I'm sorry, I've forgotten. But I think now it's 3 million. And actually it's estimated that there's 2 million alien invaders now in Ireland. And those are, so 3 million Irish, and those are actually native Irish. They're actually indigenous people. The Irish are, believe it or not. Yeah, white people, indigenous. They actually exist. Those are the Irish people. They are the indigenous people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and there's estimated about 3 million of them and about 2 million aliens, and they're mostly military age males. So at this point, I'm just going to be directionally accurate. I would say that the military age invaders, males, are going to be roughly equivalent to the military age males, Irish, men, if not actually already outnumbered. And keeping in mind that the aliens, the invaders, I mean, they're being put into straight up military type camps. Somebody has mapped out the locations of all the camps in Dublin for me, and he'll probably watch this interview, and you should see the locations. They're like set up perfectly to control the city, next to the airport, next to the port, next to the main roads, and those camps that they're building, they're using T barriers, Jersey barriers that I've only seen those in wars. Matt Bracken noticed that too. We both watch this. We both get daily briefings. Matt and I get them together. And we get briefings from Ireland daily, and we're watching what's unfolding. And you can see that these camps that are being built, these are straight up military camps. And if you read the book, the Creature from Jekyll Island, which again I just finished it last night, so it's fresh in my mind right now, you'll see him talking about doing things like this, putting in a UN army in places like that, which is clearly what that is. The people that are being installed into Ireland, that's your new army. They're going to replace the Irish. The Irish army's only got like less than 7,000 people, like 6,300, something like that. And you keep in mind, most of those are going to be support people. But the people that are coming in, these are military age males. These are fighters.
So this kind of thing just really makes zero sense to me. Why would the Irish government, the people that are there, why would they allow that to happen?
Oh, easy. Go back to what I mentioned before, brainwashing, right? So they've installed over a period of time, pliable people. I was talking with Mary Lou McDonald. She's the leader of Sinn Féin, which is, the political arm of the IRA. She's dumber than, her IQ is like room temperature. I was out with her. I was at one of her speeches. I went to a bar with her. I don't drink, but it's Irish thing. So we're out there and I'm asking her about food and she's like, oh, she's like talking about DEI and all this other crap. I'm like, what about food, Mary Lou? You don't have enough fertilizer and we produce enough food for 25 million. All the Irish would say that. Every Irish you ask, which I ask a lot, they would all say the same talking point. We export enough food for, I'm like, okay, whatever. If there's one thing that's endemic to Ireland, it's famine, right? So, you will go into famine, right? It's only because we're in this modern architecture, which is being disassembled, which they don't get it because they're just like other cultures around the world. They're in their happy world. Go get your Irish, go to the pub on Saturday at noon. They're getting soused or whatever. And, and they're just asleep while they're being invaded. Oh, we'll stand up one day. No, you won't. Because by the time you notice it's too late, McFly, you're dead, right? You're either going to tell the Irish are starting to stand up. I've done some major interviews in Ireland and they're starting to stand up. But is it too late? There's a high chance, actually. There's a very high chance that it's too late. You can't wait another year. It's probably too late already. So Irish people I talk with every day, they're talking about moving to Russia. I was talking with one a couple of weeks ago. He's already moved to Colombia. He said, I've been warning about this. I've been warning about it for 20 years or whatever. His Irish brethren thought he was just crazy. So he's like, that's it. I'm punched out. He moved to Colombia. He's finished. Right. So, there's one of your military age males. He's gone down to Colombia and others are thinking about going to places like Russia. So they'll just be replaced. Right. And then you'll have Ireland as basically an aircraft carrier for the UN army. Right. Straight up. The people that don't get this yet, they're so far behind. They're the ones that are going, oh, it's conspiracy theory. It's gloom and doom. I got no time for them. We're in a state of war. This is only time for serious people. It's time for serious people to organize themselves and to begin doing things. There are no good men who do nothing. If you're not a good man if you're not doing anything. The most dangerous thing that we can do right now is talking to these microphones. You and I are doing it. There is nothing more dangerous than talking into these microphones. Look at the Telegram guy that just got arrested in France, right? They're coming for us. They're coming for people like us. There's no question about it, right? It will happen. It's a matter of time. This is the most dangerous. It's time to speak up. You're either going to man up right now or you're just worthless and you deserve to be a slave. Have fun being a slave.
Yeah, they absolutely want to control all the information that's going around. It's a critical element, and which I think just it threw a huge wrench in their plans when Elon Musk bought Twitter and changed it to X, because that at least there you can actually talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah. Over the years, I rarely talk as directly as I'm talking now, as confrontationally as I talk now, because we've gotten down to it. It's life and death. I'm in that frame of mind I only get when I'm off in actual wars, where I just don't care about any bullshit from anybody, right? Like Joe Rogan, Mr. Dopehead. I don't care. I'm beyond all that. And it's time for men to do man stuff. It's time to man up, right? Or it's over. There's not going to be another chance. That's it. Ireland is probably dead. I think Canada's dead. I think it's gone. I'm just looking at this like an oncologist looks at cancer, right? I'm not here to deliver good news. I'm not here to deliver bad news. I'm here to find what I think is the truth and deliver it. If I'm an oncologist that won't actually give you his actual honest diagnosis, he's worthless. I'm not going to tell you got cancer because it'll make you feel bad. What kind of use is that, doctor, right? I'm a doctor of war, right? War is what I do. That's why I'm in these places all the time, right? That's why I'm here in Thailand. I'm not on vacation, right? I was here for 2 of the coups. There was fighting right outside my window right here, right? I mean, I was here there, I'm watching the playing field develop, right? I'm watching conditions being set for famine and tremendous amounts of human osmotic pressure, right? That will just flood the United States. Canada's gone. I really think Canada's gone. That's just my honest opinion. My view. Look at my track record on Afghanistan and Iraq and Hong Kong and other things. Just look at my track record. Just pick out a dart and pick 20 of my random dispatches that I've written in the last 20 years. Yeah. Throw a dart, read 20 random ones and see how they turned out, right?
So I'm telling you,
I think Ireland and Belgium and Luxembourg and Netherlands and Germany and Sweden, France, they are gone unless they get very deadly serious right now. And Ireland's probably already gone. And likewise with Canada.
Well, the UK's got to be really close behind that too.
I was in that big mosque a couple of years ago. I went in there with Masako Ganaha, actually. A giant mosque downtown. We went in there with Andy No, actually. I mean, it's just what are you going to do? And look who's behind it. The king. You want to call him the king? King Charles, Mr. Jabber, Mr. Jab Pusher, Mr. Epstein Island guy. You know what I'm saying? They're a bunch of clowns, right? I mean, seriously. Dresses up in his throne, wears his big old hat. Here I am with my staff. He's a clown. They're dirtballs, right? They're nothing. These people are not educated. They're rich. And they have destroyed their own country. They have destroyed the United Kingdom. It's dead. It's over, right? And who's going to be next? You're going to have to get deadly serious about defending yourselves. And waiting to, I keep hearing people talk about, I got my AR-15, I'll be safe. You're a clown. If you think your little AR-15 is going to save you, you're a clown. It's time to man up. You got to get organized, right? These people are very deadly serious. The ones that you saw coming through the Darien Gap, they're not on dope. These are high testosterone men, right? They're stabbing people across Europe right now. They're killing people daily. They take cars and run them over. They rape the children. They rape the women. They rape the men. They rape the boys. They'll rape a man as quick as they'll rape a child. All these pretty boys that I see in Japan, these pretty boys I see in Thailand, these pretty boys I see in the United States, you go down the street signs, and you see these pretty boys. You can't tell. Well, isn't he pretty? Looks like a little girl, right? China doesn't let signs. There's no signs like that in China. People who've been to China know what I'm talking about. They don't have signs of pretty boys that you can't tell if they're boys or girls. They don't have any of that. They're still manned up. They realize testosterone matters. Testosterone matters. It's time to get off the dope, get off the alcohol, get off the couch, and get organized, right? And start doing things. This is it. You're down to the wire, right? We're doing the most dangerous thing right now, talking on these microphones. There is nothing more dangerous that can be done than telling people that it's time to do something. You're not going to win by, you're going to go vote harder, push the button harder like a pigeon, right? What's it going to do? What did Ted Nugent say? Bah, right? I mean, seriously, we're down to it. Men, it's time to man up.
It's slinging some serious stuff there, Michael. So, yeah, I mean, again, in the overall conditions of the world, I mean, I understand. Okay, so that piece that you're talking right now is literally putting us in a emergency mode. Is the alien, the immigration, but the famine part is another part that really bothers me. I mean, I heard when you were talking to Jordan Peterson and you were over there in the Netherlands, the reason that the Netherlands farmers were, driving, they're leaving their farms and they're driving into Brussels and wherever, and, spraying manure all over the government buildings there. What is going on? I think between what they're trying to do with the Brussels and the land grab. And I don't know if you've heard the 30-30, what's going on in the U.S., where they're trying to lock up 30% of the U.S. land for the climate change people. But between Ukraine with, a third of the wheat for the world, what's happening in the Netherlands, and now what's happening here, why would, well, again, I think we've covered the why, but how big of an effect is all of that as an accumulative, if I'm saying that word right, is that all going to be contributing to the famine that's headed our way?
It's all part of the plan. The climate scare nonsense, right? It's completely not the only cult people never see is the cult they're in, the climate cult, the Trump cult, the Biden cult, the Clinton cult before, right? I got to have a woman as a president. That the stupid cults like that, right? I gotta, you can't even make up this stuff. I mean, that's how low the IQ has gotten now. We got to have a woman president, irregardless of their brain level, right? Got to have a black woman president. Is not even black; she's Indian, right? It's like you can't even make up this stuff. I mean, so listen, read the book. I just finished it last night, so it's on my mind. The Creature from Jekyll Island. They talk about the farmland. The author Griffin talks. He's 92 or 93 years old now. That guy's never going to die. That guy's going to live to immortality with the things that he's published and told people about for decades now. I mean, he's warned Americans about the Federal Reserve and the farmland and these, the media, which has been bought in bulk for more than a century. Again, everybody who thinks that they remember when media was honest, you don't remember when media was honest, because if you're alive watching this, it was not honest when your grandparents were born. It was already captured long ago. You just remember the time when you didn't realize what you know now, right? That's what you remember. It was all part of the kayfabe, right? It's our Constitution and our incredible founding fathers. Those people were brilliant. They didn't go to their government funded schools didn't exist. They were, what did Benjamin Franklin say? Be like Jesus and Socrates, right? I mean, those guys, they were incredibly intelligent. You should go back and just read the sort of things that our founding fathers wrote. The Constitution and the government, the United States of America that they bequeathed to us was meant for a much more educated population than we have now. It was meant for a population that is not just into smoking dope and watching Joe Rogan, right? People who think that they're men because they watch UFC and they go and can put people in headlocks, so they're all manned up now. You know what I mean? Big deal. It's a big deal. You're a good UFC fighter. You got people from Haiti. They're going to show up to your door with machetes and chop you to pieces, right? You and your UFC with your AR-15, right? These are machete cultures. They're here, right? Rwanda style. What I'm getting to is it's time to study up, man up, testosterone up. Don't put up with any of these pretty boys anymore. Don't treat them as equals. Stop treating them as equals. They are not equals. People that will not help defend our women and children and our country are not our equals, right? It's time for men to do man stuff, period. If you're not a man and you won't stand up for our country, you are not my equal. You're a slave, and I don't care about you anymore. I care about men and women who are going to stand up for our country. That's it. For those, I'll give my life. But for the rest, got no time for you.
Yeah, I'm with you, brother. And I'm telling you, it's even 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when we were down there, and I first met with you and met Chuck, everybody else, and you took us into the Darien Gap. Back then we thought the problem was bad, but here we are 3 years later. It is so infinitely worse than what we even imagined, when we were down there.
No, it's not worse than we imagined. It's exactly what I was saying. That's why I was in the Darien Gap.
Yeah.
It's not worse than we imagined. Go back, throw a dart at the things that I was publishing. I was predicting this, as were many others. It's not me being Nostradamus. There's a lot of people. Griffin in the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, he's predicting this back in the 60s. I mean, that guy was predicting this when I was in diapers, right? You should look at his old stuff in black and white in his films, the things that he's talking about when he's a young man. And now he's like 92 or 93. He's on Twitter. Still, that guy is so accurate. He's unbelievable, right? There's a lot of people that saw it.
So what was he seeing?
They got sidelined. It's very clear.
Yeah. But back in the 60s, what was he seeing that made him say what he did?
I don't know, but you know what? I was looking at his Twitter last night, and I'm going to reach out to him. And when I was going to bed last night, I was thinking of questions that I can ask him, because old men like that and old women like that are gold mines for wisdom. And you got to mine them while they're still here, because that's one of the questions I have is, how did you notice this? Right. I was reading his biography and studying up more on him. Like I didn't notice this until well into adulthood. Right. And he noticed it when he was much younger. How did he notice that? But I do remember when I was younger, a lot of the older people back then would warn about stuff like this. They would. And they were often sidelined. Oh, they're crazy or whatever. But it turns out they're not. I mean, I remember my grandmother saying stuff like, she said, one day you're going to be buying bottled water from the stores. And I'm like, Granny, who's going to buy bottled water from the stores? Don't you sass me, Michael. I'm like, no, Granny, nobody's ever going to buy bottled water from the stores.
Just drink it out of the sink.
I mean, that's my grandmother. She didn't go to Harvard. And all these things that she would say, I mean, like, I call her like Granny Alex Jones at this point. You know what I mean? Because I wish if I had the wisdom or a tape recorder, I would have just put it on whenever my grandmother and grandfather were talking. I'd have been like, hold on, let me go get some new batteries and get this thing going. Because so many of these things have just come to pass. Their generation saw it. They lived through the Great Depression, which was manufactured by the Federal Reserve and others. The Great Depression never had to happen. It never had to happen, right? Read the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and you'll see what somebody, when he was a young man, he was born in 1931, Griffin, right? The author. He's still alive. He's still kicking. I don't think the guy's ever going to die, because people like that don't quite die. They just keep living on because we'll take their word and keep spreading it. He's planted his mustard seeds, right? I mean, but the point is there's people from that generation who clearly saw it. We just have to listen to them.
Absolutely. All right, Michael, I know you've got more people to meet with, man. So I appreciate everything you've talked about. You know, tell me or tell my audience where they can find your Substack and everything else that you're publishing.
My Substack is just my name, Michael Yon, Yankee Oscar November, YON, Yankee Oscar November. And I'm on X pretty much daily. And I'll be back to the United States soon enough and you know, watching these things unfold and warning as many people as I can. Read The Creature from Jekyll Island, and you're going to see a lot of this stuff unfolding. The guy was born in 1931, Griffin. Pay attention to that guy.
Yeah, well, there's some wisdom like that back in our grandparents. I mean, my grandparents were ranchers and farmers, and you know, I wish a whole lot more people like in Washington D.C. would listen to them because they
I shouldn't
have
say pay attention to that guy. I should say pay attention to that man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
He warned about this. You read that book, and people in our grandparents' age, why did they see it, Jared? Why did they see it? Why did they see it and our generation suddenly didn't see it?
Yeah, they didn't have the stupid distractions that we do.
Yeah.
For one.
So it's time for us to pick up the baton from people like Griffin and our grandparents and do exactly what we're doing now. Tell as many people as possible, wake them up, take no prisoners when it comes to man children, or as they call them in Japanese, bearded boys, right? I mean, all these pretty boys and all this, got no time for them. No time for them, right? You want to go smoke your dope, go smoke it, right? Have fun. Yep. I will not be knocking on your door when the time comes. You know, you will not be given the secret passageway. You know what I mean? Because we don't want your dopers around in our camps, right?
Right on, brother. Okay. Well, you keep yelling loud out there and be safe.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.